Well, it happened. You know what I'm talking about. Matthew Stafford said it might be in both parties' interest if he and the Detroit Lions were no longer a couple. He's not wrong. The Lions aren't going to win a Super Bowl during the period that's left in his contract, and if he wants to leave, they can't really have the leader of their team be completely checked out walking into the building every day if they have any hope of trying to change the mood that the history of the team's created. So if we're going to acknowledge that that's a good idea, I think we need to take a look at who else is in the same boat. The Lions just threw in the towel in 2021, or Matthew Stafford threw it in for them. At least if you're a veteran on this team, that's likely the way you feel. If you're in your late 20s staring at Twitter right now and you remember that team, you're probably thinking, why would I waste my time on this? And before you guys say, wait, because you signed a contract, know that the veteran core of this team is angry that they're walking in the door every day. And that's going to have an effect on the young guys coming up, and it's not going to be a good one. It's time for a purge, to be entirely honest. The Lions have to field a team, but it shouldn't be this one. With Matthew Stafford, there may have been a path to winning more games next year and then the year after, and then who knows after that. Without him, these high-priced former Patriots players have got to go. So I'm going to go through the obvious and maybe some not-so-obvious moves that the Lions need to make. One day ago, I was all for trying to use the Lions players to field a defense, and I think they still could, but why? I mean, hell, the Patriots have $53 million or so in cap space next year. Maybe they'll take some of these guys back after Bob Quinn rented them for a year or two. If the Lions eat the dead cap, see what they can get. Whether they actually spend this money on players in 2021 isn't what actually matters. It's just to get out from under all these deals. Some players the Lions have are signed to big contracts, and it's just that the contract's too big. Bob Quinn was a terrible evaluator of professional football players and loved to hand out big deals for multiple years. The best example is Danny Shelton. The Lions saved $4 million by cutting him, and he played poorly last year. He's a marginal fit for what Aaron Glenn's likely to do on defense. Shelton was supposed to be a stout run defender who could anchor a defense, but he got pushed around all year and spent far too much time on the ground. This is an easy $4 million because the cap space can be used directly for a better player at that position. Nick Williams is a better scheme fit, but he saves the team even more money. That $4.7 million could also be spent to bring in a player that's a better fit, or go toward a player at a different position if they want to go that route. So by getting rid of the underperforming defensive tackles that couldn't stop the run this year, if you can score a 7th-round pick in the 2022 draft for either of them, great. But if not, you still make both these moves. So the two bad defensive tackles are gone, and you get $8.7 million in salary cap space back. Kevin Strong and John Atkins have been every bit as good as those two, and those guys make under $1 million each. Desmond Trufant is not as bad as he was last year for the Lions, but he saves you $6.5 million, and you can just start Jeff Okudah and Amani Oruwariye and get on with this. If you're willing to take anything, someone out there might be willing to give you up a player they don't like, or one of those future 7th-round draft picks just to pick up Trufant and take a flyer on him. But either way you go, you've got young options, and you're likely to draft more. Justin Coleman is a really solid nickel zone corner, but he's been playing exclusively in man coverage for 2 years. And other than a very brief period to begin 2019, he hasn't done it very well. Seattle's defense is being utilized in more places across the league, and in that scheme, Coleman was one of the best nickel corners in the league. Any team picking him up would get that player for 2 years at $9 million a year, which is a relatively decent value. Like the Jets under Robert Saleh need good players, and they have picks. Seattle's defense also hasn't done all that well since their last wave of free agents, Coleman being one of them left. If there's nobody willing to take Coleman's deal, he's a giant cap hit for 2 more years, and the Lions save $5 million, and much like the Stafford trade, this is likely beneficial for both parties. 2 corners that couldn't cover the floor with a rug last year combined to save you $11.5 million in cap space, so we're at $19.2 million created so far. 38.2 if you include the Stafford trade, and we haven't lost a single player that the old Lions would miss. Speaking of players the Lions wouldn't miss, Chase Daniel obviously has to go. When he was forced into action, he was terrible, and he got a shot at what it would look like if he was the starter, and it wasn't good. He's unfortunately got $1.5 million guaranteed in his salary this year, but I think the Lions would still be better off to purge him and get the $2 million back. Speaking of terrible contracts, you got Jesse James will save you $2.2 million. Bowden is probably going to get hurt getting out of the shower. Christian Jones saves $2 million, And none of those guys are getting you anything back other than the satisfaction of not having to watch them play football anymore, but the Lions should still do it. So we're at $44.9 million in freed up cap space. And again, we haven't actually made the team worse in any appreciable way outside a little bit of depth being lost. Brother, that money will buy you a whole lot of depth if that's what you want to spend it on. Those are the deals the Lions should bail on, whether they can get any compensation back for them or not. This team has to be open for business. Let's do this thing. But we're not done yet. There's some guys that if someone's willing to offer up a deal, the Lions should likely move on from in 2021. Allegedly, the Lions were in some sort of competition for Halapalooty. For the lineman known as Big V last year, they outbid the competition and got their man. Well, if that team's still out there and they still want that guy, the Lions could probably trade him. Doing so would save the team $4 million, and Terrell Crosby is good enough at right tackle that signing Vaitai was stupid in the first place. And anyone who watched them already knew that. Crosby makes under $1 million, so to get out from under this deal, the Lions need something back, unfortunately, because his 2021 salary is fully guaranteed. They can just cut him, but it takes up $14.6 million in dead cap, which is more than he actually makes if he's on the team. So if nobody will take Big V's deal, he's a Lion in 2021. He was injured last year because of Matt Patricia's stupid hill. It might not be the worst thing to keep him because he was actually a decent player previously. But if we can get rid of him, that's $50.5 million in cap space we've created so far. J.B. Collins checks out when a team isn't winning. Literally anything back would make this trade worth making. He is the Lions' only linebacker worth keeping, but man, he is not a guy that's great in the locker room when you're a bad team. It would cost the team a little over $330K more cap space to cut him than to keep him, so you probably don't do that because $7 million of his salary is guaranteed. If they can trade him, though, that saves the team $6.7 million in cap space, which takes us to $57.2 in fresh, shiny new money that the team could spend on getting better. But this move does make the team less competitive immediately. Trey Flowers is the Lions' best player on defense. That also means he's the player most likely to actually be able to get a solid return in compensation for a trade. The rest of the guys we've been talking about would land a day 3 pick, maybe a day 3 pick next year or a day 3 pick in 2023. But Flowers is likely somewhere in round 2 or 3 that the compensation you'd get back for him would be from a team that needs a pass rusher and they're looking to compete immediately. Several teams are running Patriot-style defenses now, and they're the most likely candidates to make this move. Flowers only saves the Lion $5 million in cap space for 2021, but over the other 2 years left on his deal, that's $46 million in freed up cap space for a younger player that's going to be a better fit. So we've hit $62.2 million in cap space for 2021 that we've freed up. The advantage of this kind of fire sale isn't limited to 1 year, because let's say that a team didn't make any of these moves and waited until the following year, limping through a 4 or 5 win season, not obtaining that extra cap space. Flowers, Coleman, Collins, Vaitai, and Jones. Although there is a voided year on his deal, it's still a dead cap hit. James and Daniel also would still be under contract and still all need to be moved on from to make room for other options for the same reasons that we need to move on from them now. Rather than having created all that cap space in 2021 and being free of Bob Quinn's mistakes, year 2 of this rebuild would be saddled with $25 million in dead cap to get rid of those players during the second season. It's really just much better to rip the Band-Aid off and get this thing rolling. The Lions have a few other big contracts, like someone would give up a first for Taylor Decker, absolutely, without a doubt. But he's a guy that can be the cornerstone of this rebuild. He's under contract for a really long time. And by the time that contract ends, we'll know the results of this. It also costs the Lions more to get rid of Decker than to keep him. They could probably get a solid return for Frank Ragnow as well, though it's optimistic to think that a center would get you back a first. But he's a free agent after 2021. Which makes that move a little more likely. The team needs to have a conversation to determine whether he's on board for the long haul, just to see if he wants out. Joe Dahl's another offensive lineman with a sizable cap hit, but someone has to block for this rookie quarterback that's coming in. There's not really any other moves that save the team more than chump change in relation to the cap, and unfortunately, the only other players that could net significant return are guys like TJ Hawkinson and Jeff Okudah, who are young enough and good enough to be a part of what's coming. They're not likely to be shipped out, though Hawkinson would probably get you a first back. I'm not sure Okudah would at this point. That $62.2 million in cap space that we've created can go a long way toward repairing the roster. Ragnow is much more likely to stay if he gets a raise, as an example. They need multiple receivers for this rookie QB they're about to pick up. Otherwise, he's got no one to throw to. There's also a plethora of free agent options at that position, so Let's say the Lions grab a borderline wide receiver 1 like Corey Davis or Will Fuller with a less expensive wide receiver 2 or 3 like Curtis Samuel or Josh Reynolds and give Ragnow a bump. Chances are year 1 of those cap hits is about $20 million. Remember, the first year is always the cheapest. Romeo Okwara is only 25 years old and he's coming off a 10-sack season. He or someone like him will set the team back another 15. A middle linebacker will be 7 or 8. A safety will be another 7 or 8. And then with the draft and all that extra draft capital they've picked up through all these trades, they can fill out the rest of the roster for this year. They're not going to be worse than they are right now. The following season, all that dead cap we created in 2021 comes off the books, and the team has all that money to build even further or extend the few Bob Quinn draft picks that did pan out. Did I leave out the fact that we created $61.4 million in dead cap charges for the 2021 season there? That's an unpleasant number to be sure, but recall that in the second year, that creates an astronomically high amount of cap space for the team in 2022. If you've ever looked at the list of the NFL teams with the most salary cap and wondered how a team could possibly have 60 or 70 million in cap space repeatedly, this is usually how that process starts. Performing this purge does 3 things. The first is that it gets veteran players who will not want to be here or who don't deserve to be here out the door. And that's important if the front office really do want to change the culture. Day 1 of whatever OTAs there are going to be aren't a group of guys raring to get back to work right now. Right now, it's the first step of a death march. That needs to change. The second is that it immediately creates a lot of cap space and draft capital to begin remaking this roster under the new front office's vision for what this thing needs to be. The third is that it gives the team financial flexibility to stop bleeding talent to the rest of the league over relatively small amounts of money. Golden Tate, Darius Slay, Cliff Averill, Ndamukong Suh, Riley Reif, Larry Warford, Graham Glasgow, and many more have gone elsewhere because the Lions would or could not pony up a little bit of extra dough. Indirectly, the loss of all that talent over peanuts is why Matthew Stafford does not see this team as the team that can get him where he wants to go. Trying to hold on to what the Lions have only stands in the way of getting better things. The most important reason that purging this roster to speed up the rebuild is the best play is to make sure that this never happens again.